Welcome guys, I'd like to welcome you to another session in linguistics, and in today's session we will talk about the linguistic trends. A trend is like a perspective, and there are four trends in linguistics which I prefer to call research paradigms to approach the language, the human language. And as you know, linguistics is the scientific study of the language systems. There are four systems, and these trends are as follows. The first trend is known as the traditional grammar, and sometimes known as the new grammarians or the traditional grammarians. According to this trend, to study a language, then you have to go back to the classical writings in that language. There you can induce, deduce, you can prescribe and describe. You can describe and prescribe rules. You have to go back to the written forms, to the classical form, to the classical writings in this language. So they prefer the written forms or the written text over the spoken varieties of the language. Spoken varieties, according to them, are deviations from the standard forms. So the written or the classical writings in the language are the standard forms, while the spoken varieties are deviations. They mustn't be considered in learning or in studying or in prescribing and describing rules in the language. After this trend, there comes this another trend, which is structuralism or the structuralist. The leading figure in this trend is B.F. Skinner. According to this trend, or in this trend, both written or the writings or the written forms, the written text, and the spoken varieties of a language are considered. They must be both considered. According to this trend, again, learning a language is like a trial and error process. So there is a stimulus and response. So it goes like this: there is a stimulus and there is response, and they compare the learning of a language like the rat experiment they conducted. It is a famous experiment conducted by B.F. Skinner, where a rat is brought inside a box and there was a button. So once the rat is pressing that button, food comes. So they think that learning a language is like this. After structuralism, there comes the cognitive linguistics, and then these or people working in this paradigm believe that comparing the learning of a language to the rat experiment is unfair. It cannot be done like this. So according to them, language is an abstract notion. So for them, there is an internalized set of algorithms that every child has, or which enable the child to acquire a language rather than inherit a language. So there is a faculty in the brain, language, which enables a child to acquire rather than inherit a language. The leading figure in this trend is Chomsky, who again argues that there are two components like competence and performance. It is a long story. So anyway, for them, language is not activate this faculty in the brain. A child needs like some exposure, linguistic exposure. And then after this, for the cognitive linguists, language can be studied in isolation of its contextual use. You can't study a language in isolation of society, in isolation of its function. So they prefer, or they give priority to the forms rather than to the function. Then, as a reaction to this, there comes the last trend, which is functional linguistics. The leading figure in this research paradigm is Halliday. According to them, language must be studied in relation to its context it cannot be studied in isolation of society. So both form and function, according to them, must be considered. So I think these are the four linguistic trends to approach the language. Traditional grammar, who are looking at the classical writings in the language to describe rules, to describe and prescribe rules. And the second one, structuralism, who believe that is acquiring the language is like conducting an experiment in the lab, where we have like a rat that press a button and then food comes. So there is like a stimulus and response. These people also, think that we have to consider both the form, the written text and also the spoken varieties of the language. And there comes the cognitive, who study language as something abstract and believe that there are a set of rules, algorithm. There is a set of algorithms in the brain that enables human beings to acquire rather than inherit a language. And finally, functionalism, who believe that we have to study both form and function, unlike the cognitive linguists, who believe that we can study the form in isolation of function. Function is something else. Hope that you got something for today's session, and see you in another session. Thank you.